basically circled a series of names that he said were essential to solving the crimes that Epstein was up to, and that these were, represented essentially accomplices of that crime. And so Donald Trump's name is one of the circled names, along with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jean-Luc Brunel, Leslie Wexner, and some of the names that are probably more familiar to people.
In this explosive segment, Whitney Webb reveals the real connections between Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump, and why both parties are terrified of the truth. Webb lays out how Trump's business empire was tied to mobsters, blackmail, and intelligence networks, and how Clinton's White House welcomed Epstein 17 times in the 1990s, a story Republicans refused to touch. This isn't just a scandal about sex trafficking, it's about a bipartisan oligarchy protecting itself. Webb traces the financial and political web that keeps the Epstein files sealed and shows why real accountability is impossible within the current system. If you want the facts that mainstream media and both parties won't discuss, watch now.
Trump, his mentor, is a big focus of my book. Roy Cohn was a mob lawyer and had ties to this network that I just mentioned, pretty direct ties that I talk about in my book. And Roy Cohn was also involved in sex blackmail stuff. That a ring that allegedly blackmailed J. Edgar Hoover, among others, and prevented him from going after organized crime in the United States. And Roy Cohn was also Donald Trump's lawyer, while also, representing some of these mob bosses and other things. But aside from that, Trump in the late 80s got involved with this company called Resorts International. He became the controlling shareholder of it, I think, in 1987. And that was a pretty notorious CIA mob front company that was involved in all this really shady stuff in the Caribbean involving Mayor Lansky specifically. And Trump took a controlling stake in it for the purpose of expanding his hotel and casino holdings, specifically in Atlantic City. And during this period of time, he's hanging out on Robert Maxwell's yacht, for example, photographed with people like Steve Ross of Time Warner fame, who was linked to organized crime. Maxwell, the former Senator John Tower, who was an accessory with Robert Maxwell of the Promise software scandal, which again was U.S.-Israeli collaboration in committing crime, basically. In addition to that, he, allegedly became close to Ghislaine in this period, and also to Epstein, reportedly frequently partying with Epstein and Tom Barrack of Colony Capital, who's in the administration now, I believe, as ambassador to Turkey or something like that. And, they were, international playboys together. And Epstein in this period Trump in this period had also become close reportedly to John Casablancas of Elite Model Management, who is known for his preference of quote unquote child women. And his modeling agencies have a lot of scandalous accusations about trafficking and other things to figures like Adnan Khashoggi in the 80s, who was one of Epstein's clients in the 80s as well. So a lot of these guys are swimming in kind of disturbing waters of dubious legality, to put it lightly. And then in the early 90s, Trump's Atlantic City holdings and other things dragged down his business empire, and he declares bankruptcy. And in order to be bailed out, he's bailed out by Wilbur Ross, who he later rewards for that when he's president the first time, making him Commerce Secretary. But at the time, Wilbur Ross was representing the Rothschild banking interests. In the Rothschild banking interest, specifically this Wall Street M&A arm that they opened up in the 80s, was responsible for bringing Robert Maxwell to New York. So basically, Trump as a business icon would not have existed beyond the early 1990s if it wasn't for the Rothschild banking interests. Who have a lot of affiliations to people in sort of the Epstein network, and specifically Epstein's financial crimes, which include a lot of currency speculation in this, what the New York Times once called a currency speculation cabal, including people like Jamie Goldsmith, also backed by the Rothschilds, and even George Soros, whose first his quantum fund in like the late 60s was bankrolled by the French Rothschild interests. And for anyone that's familiar, the Rothschild family has a very long and storied history with Zionism and the establishment of the state of Israel, and being a major patron of that. So, they've definitely had a lot of influence, I would think, over Trump now, since he owes them a lot. and also, the Epstein friendship, beyond that period of time, persisted and continued up until the early 2000s when they had a falling out. And there's a lot of conflicting reports about what that falling out was about. But ultimately, it seems to have been over this real estate deal. They both were competing for the same Palm Beach mansion, and neither of them got it. But apparently, their fight over that sort of led them to end their, multi-decade friendship at that point. And Epstein, for example, claims that he introduced Trump to Melania, but of course, Trump and Melania deny that and say it was another mogul guy, sort of a protege of John Casablancas of Elite Models, named Paolo Zampoli, who there's a lot to say on him, but I'll leave that for another time. But the ties are extensive, and maybe not as extensive or as damaging in some respects as some people would like them to be, but he's certainly not absolved of involvement. I would also say that in the case of the Black Book, which a lot of people are familiar with, it's this rather infamous book of contacts of Epstein. It was originally produced by Epstein's former butler or house manager in Palm Beach, named Alfredo Rodriguez, and Rodriguez was shopping it around to people suing Epstein in civil suits, and he basically circled a series of names that he said were essential to solving the crimes that Epstein was up to, and that these were, represented essentially accomplices of that crime. And so Donald Trump's name is one of the circled names, along with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jean-Luc Brunel, Leslie Wexner, and some of the names that are probably more familiar to people that have more superficially looked into this case. Also, a very close friend of Trump's is circled. His name is Flavio Briatore. He's an Italian guy, a businessman. I wrote about him recently in a pretty deep dive.
Webb explains how both parties have a vested interest in managing the Epstein fallout for their own protection. While the media fixates on Trump or Clinton's post-presidency connections to Epstein, neither side will address the real story: the criminal and intelligence networks that run through the highest levels of U.S. power. Webb details how the same billionaire networks, crime syndicates, and intelligence agencies have rigged the system for decades. The Epstein story is a window into the true power structure in America, one that will never be held accountable by electoral politics alone.
Introduced Naomi Campbell to Epstein, and of course, Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell were fixtures for several years at Heidi Klum's Halloween party. There's pictures, all over the internet of that. And also, Heidi Klum and Campbell, among others, were prominent Victoria's Secret models in their annually televised fashion shows, which reportedly Epstein had, a role in organizing. And there's pictures of him being in the front row with Wexner. And plenty of, documented evidence of him claiming to be a model scout or one of the top people in modeling for Victoria's Secret, and using that as a lure to, entrap women, among other things. At this point, the waters have been so muddied that there's always going to be a segment of his base that doesn't believe anything, no matter what comes out. He'll just say it's a hoax planted in there by James Comey or whatever. I mean, it's hard to really... the narrative management is in full swing, but I think you can look at the available evidence, like the things that I just laid out, and I'm sure I've forgotten something. It is kind of a long timeline. They, the people behind Epstein and the people behind Trump, there is a considerable bit of overlap, as I laid out earlier, because Epstein at the end of the day wasn't the mastermind of whatever scheme he was running. He was working for other people. Most obviously Leslie Wexner, but arguably a lot of these other billionaires, most of which have ties to Israel, but a lot of them also have ties to this transnational Jewish fraternal organization that sort of, models itself after Freemasonry, called B'nai B'rith. Roy Cohn was a significant part of that. His father used to run the New York branch. Edgar Bronfman and Wexner and a lot of these prominent figures in the mega group have donated to it or been on its board of overseers. And it's the organization that produced the Anti-Defamation League, or the ADL, that goes around sort of conflating criticisms of billionaires like this with anti-Semitism, and also anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, among other things. So important to point that out, I guess, because, basically if I'm talking about in criticizing Leslie Wexner, who was, accused by the Columbus Police Department of having ties to organized crime, and I go and I report that they said that, I mean, that's not anti-Semitic. I just want to point out that this guy was a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
And to conflate as Leslie Wexner with all Jews is absolutely insane. There's plenty of Jews that are very against the Epstein network. I think that's quite clear. And also, there's Jews being arrested for protesting about what Israel's doing in Gaza.
Yeah.
So, it's, frankly, pretty dishonest. But if you want to keep the heat off of the real people that were managing this, one way you would do that would be to attempt to criminalize, scrutiny of these very prominent billionaires who masquerade as philanthropists, but really they're a lot more than that. It could be a lot of things. I have some ideas. So only, I think today, the past couple days, the New York Times got around to publishing pictures that were taken inside Epstein's New York townhouse the day he was arrested. And the FBI supposedly collected a lot of material, CDs and other things from that townhouse when it was raided. And we don't know what was on them. I mean, Pam Bondi is now saying it's CP or child porn. But we don't really know that because she said, months prior said it was something else. Yeah, well, I would keep in mind, too, that not long before Epstein was arrested, he was filmed for like 20 hours or something by one of Trump's chief political strategists of yesteryear, Steve Bannon. And Bannon was doing that to attempt to rehabilitate Epstein's image after he had been, imprisoned and gotten that sweetheart deal, the plea deal in 2007, 2008. And, if Bannon was that close to Trump, it's safe to say that to Epstein, that a lot of the people, in that network, maybe not Trump himself personally, but again, you have to look a tier up above these people. There was an interest in rehabilitating Epstein for some specific reason. I think, it gets a little too close to Trump's inner circle. Maybe it's not Trump himself in the more recent years, but, that Bannon involvement should be, pretty significant. And then also the fact that, our government is increasingly being taken over by public-private partnerships with the biggest big tech firms of Silicon Valley. And Epstein, before his arrest, was trying to rebrand as a VC guy, specifically in, Silicon Valley networks. And he has significant ties to almost every CEO of importance in the tech world. Bill Gates of Microsoft, Ghislaine Maxwell had a relationship of some type with Jeff Bezos. We know a lot more now, of course, about the Peter Thiel Epstein relationship and the Musk Epstein relationship. Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn, also very close to Epstein. So why did he have so many ties to these big tech guys? I think they want to avoid scrutiny of those kind of things because they run a lot of the most significant government contractors. Peter Thiel created Palantir, which contracts for all 18 intelligence agencies, is now embedded in the IRS, has all your health data at HHS. And is a leader in the AI market, and I mean has just expanded hugely in terms of its how intertwined it's become with the U.S. government. And Musk, for example, has a lot of military contractors. Thiel funds a lot of up and coming military contractors, and also is the political benefactor of the current vice president. So this could be something. Not necessarily in the files about Trump. It could be about people that are, a tier above in front of the faces that are sort of rolled out to us as the faces of political power, whether that's Trump or J.D. Vance.
To watch the full interview, check the link in the description. Whitney Webb's research proves real accountability won't come from either major party. Only public pressure, independent journalism, and local action can challenge the entrenched oligarchy. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and join the movement for real change. SIM swap fraud is sweeping the globe, and your mobile security is at risk. Switch to Ifani and lock out SIM swap fraud and get the most elite mobile protection in the world. Ifani guarantees 100% protection from SIM swaps backed by a $5 million insurance policy. Stay secure with reliable coverage, free international roaming, and unlimited data. Trust Ifani to keep your communications and assets secure. Get military-grade protection, 24/7 concierge service, and a hassle-free upgrade. Click the link below for $150 off. Thanks for watching. Help support this channel and receive exclusive offers from one of our partners located in the description. We'll see you on the next one.